Great. Okay, excellent. We are live here tonight, and I am very happy to welcome Ami Watkin as my guest on this live conversation with women who have left big law. So my name is Elena Deutsch, and I'm the founder of WIL, Women Interested in Leaving Big Law. And I met Ami through LinkedIn maybe, 6-8 weeks ago, and we've totally connected. And I asked Ami if she would come on to have a live conversation to share her story about leaving big law, starting a side hustle, then starting to teach other women how to create their own side hustle. And we're going to talk also about networking. So welcome, Ami.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Ami is also a former big law associate at DLA Piper and Morrison and Cohen, and she left just a little over a year ago, May 2017.
Yeah.
Hung out her own shingle called Watkin Legal,
Yep.
and like I said, has started the Integrated Hustle.
Yep.
So super happy to be talking with you tonight.
Thank you. Me too. Me too. Love
Say again?
I love to talk transitions.
Hey, okay, so we're going to jump right in. So why don't you please tell us about your own legal transition, how you decided to leave big law, and like what was going on for you then?
Yeah, so I worked in big law for almost 4 years altogether, just under 4 years. I did 2 years at DLA Piper, as you mentioned, and I did leverage finance work mostly and a little bit of M&A when I was there. Really long hours, really, really tough. And then I transitioned to Morrison Cohen, which is slightly smaller, but still sort of a high volume firm that their bread and butter is work in the lower middle market private equity space, and did a lot of mergers and acquisitions while I was with them. And at DLA, I was just getting crushed. It was just really long hours, and I was really sort of struggling, and I wanted to do more M&A work as well. And so I decided to make a change and sort of dial down the volume a little bit and transition to a slightly smaller firm. And then at Morrison & Cohen, I was able to catch my breath a little bit, which was refreshing. And I did do much more of the work that I was interested in, which is M&A, which I find to be a little bit more intuitive. But I just wasn't really happy with the traditional structure of a firm, particularly for this point in my life. It was too hierarchical for me. It was a little too traditional. That firm is, and it's a great firm, but it was unbeknownst to me prior to really joining, actually a bit more conservative and old-fashioned in terms of the way it was operated, which was a bit of a change from DLA. And so it didn't feel like the right fit, and I just felt like it was time to make a change. And I initially was not planning to hang out my own shingle. But I met another attorney who had left Debevoise, which is a big law firm, big, very white shoe firm. And she had started her own solo practice. And when I talked to her, she had just sort of taken on a partner. And she said, I started doing this like freelance legal work, and just little by little it snowballed. And, I can work a lot less. I can still underprice any big law firm out there in terms of what I charge. And, it's a lot more fun doing it by myself. And I had this sort of light bulb moment where I thought, oh, I could do that. Sure. So okay. I mean, so it was sort of, I sort of backed into that decision, and I gave notice in May, and took a month off. And then when I got home, sort of mostly enjoyed the balance of last summer, did a little work here and a little work there. And then I've sort of eased into this new life of working on my own.
Fantastic. And what was the noise in your head? What was like I talk with my clients a lot about the inner critics and getting to know them so that you can recognize them and quell them. So what was sort of some of the inner noise in your head?
I think I really wanted to make a change. I really wanted to start my first side hustle business, Cuba Frida, importing artisan goods from Mexico. It's something I literally had been wanting to do since high school.
Wow. Yeah.
And I really felt like I had reached a point where if I didn't try now, I was just going to continue on the path of sort of the slow moving escalator of big law, and then look up one moment and be a partner or about to make partner and sort of think, where did the time go?
Yeah.
And I knew, you know, like I said, I had really positive experiences at Morrison Cohen and really positive experiences at DLA too. It was really hard, but I have really, really good friends from both places. And I knew, you know, this is always here for me if I need it. You know, I personally hope that I'm able to create a, you know, and so far I have been able to create a life outside of big law. But it's there, you know, and particularly my contacts at Morrison Cohen have been super supportive of me in this transition. So, you know, didn't feel like I was, you know, running away from a burning building. It was an intentional.
Good. Yeah. That's such an important word. I think so many of my clients want to live a more intentional career and life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what else helped you make this change where, you know, a lot of people feel they have their sunk costs and they feel really, really beholden to their student debt. So what else helped you kind of prepare financially without, you know, going into detail on your finances, but what else helped you get ready?
Yeah, so I will say I'm very fortunate in that I did not have massive student debt. My parents were very kind and helped me quite a bit with law school. So I had some debt, but I was able to pay it off within, you know, a year or two of starting. So that thankfully was not something hanging over me. So I recognize that is a little bit of a unique situation because many people don't have that.
Yeah.
But you know, it took me probably almost a year to decide to get to the point where I was ready to leave, you know, from the time where I was feeling sort of very exasperated after just a rough transaction that I was working on and feeling like I really needed help, you know, to sort of like reaching out and getting support to sort of work through that process. And then I started saving as much as I could. And I just knew like the more I can build up a cushion for myself, the better it's going to be. And so, you know, I set up like automatic withdrawals going into a savings account pretty aggressively and just really watch that number grow. You know, I was fortunate, you know, I was a fourth year associate at a mid-sized firm and earning the money that came with that. So, you know, that sort of gave me a lot of comfort. And I knew like, okay, I'm not going to end up unable to pay the rent on my apartment. You know, I gave myself a lot of runway. But I mean, it was a slow step-by-step process of deciding what to do and what comes next.
Was there any moment that like the decision became really clear? Because one of the things I work with clients on is like when we make a decision, it's powerful, right? You're cutting something off to go towards something else. Yeah. So what helped you kind of really cut the cord?
I think for me, a lot of it, you know, that's really interesting because I agree. I think sort of decision making and that sort of mental shift is really powerful. I don't honestly even know exactly when it happened. I was pretty clear that sort of the traditional law firm environment at that stage of my life was not working for me. So I knew that something had to change. So that was kind of a decision made already. And then really, I would say the bigger thing was adjusting my thinking around what success looked like and what a successful career looked like. And I would think that was my much bigger challenge because I am very much a person who likes prestige. I like to be the best. I like to be told I'm the best. I was the best. That was really hard for me to let go of, you know, because I really, you know, I liked being super successful and I was, but it was at the same time, I wasn't happy. So really trying to parse those two concepts of, you know, just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to keep doing it. and really sort of turning that concept of success on its head. I think that really was the pivotal.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit, because I want to come back to this notion of success and how you redefined it for yourself. But I think it might be like a good moment to also get into like, how did you get into doing your side hustle? You said it had been an idea since you were in high school. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I first went to Mexico on an art and Spanish program this summer before my senior year of high school in San Miguel de Allende, which is a big tourist destination, a huge expat community, a huge artist community. And I just fell in love with it. And I kept going back. I went back to study abroad in college. I went back after college to teach English. And I just saw so many beautiful things. And I knew that they were not available up here. You know, they're just not. And I haven't spent a ton of time in Texas or Southern California. So I'm sure that there's significantly more there, you know, closer to the border. But there's all of these incredible textiles and ceramics and just really handmade items that aren't available here. And so I really wanted to bring them up. And I knew that it was not a really expensive venture to try. And so once I kind of decided that I was going to, and having been a corporate attorney and understanding just the basic functions of forming an LLC, you know, getting an EIN, like the really basic things that come with starting a business, which was, you know, took me 2 seconds to do. Then, you know, I said, I'm just going to give myself a couple $1,000s to play with. And I started last fall. And I did a couple of trunk shows around the holidays. I did another one earlier this year, and I'm definitely sort of now like reworking it and figuring out where I want to go next. But it's really been so much fun, and it's not right now. This is not a money-making project for me. This is purely like fun. And, you know, I haven't lost any money or nominally, and it's just been a great experience. And I've learned a ton about running a product-based business too, and what that looks like. So it's so different than the service economy that I've been a part of, and what I like and don't like about that. So that has also been an experience and sort of raised some new stuff for me to work through in terms of spending to outsource and delegate and things like that, to then free myself up to be able to do other things. So that is still very much a work in progress, but it's fun.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're really running 3 businesses now. You're running, what's the name of the import-export? It's Cooper, what is it?
Cuba Frida.
Cuba Frida. Yeah. So Cuba Frida, your Watkin Legal, and the Integrated Hustle, which is a new project for you that you co-founded, and where you're teaching other women how to start your side hustle. Exactly. So tell us a little bit about that, and also tell us a little bit about like what life is. When we start with what life is like as a solo practitioner too, because you've hung out your own shingle now, and like tell us a little bit about that and how you're generating revenue, and then take us into the integrated hustle.
Yeah, so life as a solo practitioner is so different from life in a law firm. I think the biggest thing is having total control and autonomy. I spend my time where I want to. I wear the clothes that I want to wear. I am in the parts of town I want to be in. You know, I never really liked going up to Midtown. So I'm rarely above, I think, 14th Street or 23rd Street now. And I'm in Brooklyn, which is where I live. I'm here now. So that's been amazing. In terms of business development, it's been sort of a slow, windy road. And I'm starting to get the hang of it, but I think there's been a real confidence building learning curve that's come over the past year. Because when you're on your own, as opposed to in a law firm, you know, the buck stops with me. I'm the last line of defense. And so it really requires a different level of mastery and a different level of understanding as compared to when I was in a firm and I was doing more volume work, and it was more kind of not churn and burn, but it was like, you know, get it done. You didn't always have time later or time in the moment to really dig into the nuance of a document and understand all the elements. You sort of understood it enough. The partner would kind of come in and help you clean it up and then get it out the door. And so I think that's the big difference. You know, there's a lot more ownership over the work, and I've learned a lot more. I feel kind of more like a lawyer now than I did before, which is kind of weird because I was definitely still a lawyer and doing a lot of work. So that's you know, a big difference. And I'm sort of realizing, you know, through trial and error, the kind of work that I like doing, the kind of work that I don't like doing. So I found that I've worked on some projects through collaborating with other attorneys. That's been a big thing. I've networked like a crazy person and met all of these awesome other solo practitioners who've been wonderful resources. And there really is a real community, which was a surprise to me. I didn't really appreciate how collaborative it could be.
That's great. Yeah, you thought you would just be like solo, right?
There's a lot of people I can pick up the phone and call, and that's been really neat. And I'm sort of, you know, carving out a little bit of a niche, working with creative service providers, graphic designers, event planners, you know, video production companies, things of that nature, and working with some online influencers too. And it's really, really different to practice law doing commercial contracts versus buying or selling a company, which is this monumental process that is huge in a company's life cycle with stacks of paper. And for many commercial transactions, you know, it's like 10 to 20 pages, and it can be a significant deal, but it's much more manageable, which was really pleasant surprise.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And just while I'm thinking of it, for anyone who's on the call or is listening, who's interested in hanging up your own shingle, there is also a group, and I don't remember if we talked about it, called Women Owned Law. So they've started, this woman, Nicole Galley, has started a national network of women who are owning their own law firms. And it's a resource for people like you who, you know, how do I how do I do this? How do I do that?
Right.
If you need, you know, resources.
Absolutely.
So just wanted to share that resource. So then take us into starting the integrated hustle and how that came about and what you're up to with that.
Yeah, so that was really an organic thing that came about. A mutual friend, Lena McCarthy, she has been a friend for a long time, and she has a very successful jam company called Anarchy in a Jar here in the city. You can find it at Whole Foods, all over the place. And I was looking at some classes at the Brooklyn Brainery, which is this resource in Brooklyn that teaches sort of discrete classes on all sorts of different topics. And I saw a class about starting and running a lean business. And I kind of thought, well, I'm sort of a new small business owner. That looks interesting. And I clicked on it and I saw Lena was teaching it. And I thought, what is this? What is she doing? And so I reached out to her to learn more because I was really curious about how she sort of had pivoted into this sort of entrepreneurial teaching and coaching sort of role. And I guest starred, if you will, at one of her classes late last fall, sort of doing legal nitty-gritty overviews for small business owners. And we had a lot of fun with it and realized that together we could teach a course all around the, you know, soup to nuts, how to start a side hustle business and really how to demystify the process, clarify it, take it in bite-sized pieces, you know, A to B, B to C, and really support other women who are interested in making that move and taking that leap and who want some accountability and access to real-time support. There's many, many fabulous resources out there. Very few of them are interactive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it began. You know, it really was just started with one class and we decided to go for it, and we officially launched earlier this spring. And so far we've taught 2 workshops and we're sending out newsletters twice a week.
Great.
And, you know, slowly building a community on Instagram and through our newsletter. And we're really focused on sort of how to integrate every piece of your life. So business is one piece, but it's about so much more than business, right? Because if you start a business around something you hate, it's not going to work. And if you start a business around skills you don't have, it's not going to work, right? And if it doesn't reflect your values, it's not going to work. And so really kind of how to step back and look at the bigger picture of how to articulate your goals and your strengths and your inherent skills.
That's so funny. It's like what I do with my clients too.
Right.
I mean, I didn't realize it was so similar. So yeah, I mean,
And
yeah.
and then from there, how to integrate a real a doable self-care practice to
Oh,
keep
nice.
sane while you fight off these new things. And then finally, how to act on it. Because in truth, the nuts and bolts of starting a business, although they seem very intimidating to a non-lawyer,
Yeah.
are pretty mechanical. And it's not, that's like the easiest part.
Right.
So,
Right. Right. Right.
So,
I find it's like, it's the mindset. I don't know if we're using different words, but I find it's the mindset that it's not that, it's not hard to update your LinkedIn profile. It's not hard to network. And
right.
we'll get into networking in just a minute, but it's the mindset underneath. It's the belief. What am I telling myself?
Yeah. And how to step into, I think we talk a lot about bravery and how to step into things that are uncomfortable and practice that and learn to be brave in little ways all the time.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah.
You have to start telling people, right? That's scary. Talking about something new, and really unpacking that and really sort of owning it and seeing what happens, right? Because I think there's this big fear of something very amorphous and ambiguous and unknown that we can't even articulate, but we're terrified of it. I mean, and I am too, right? I'm not immune to that. But I've learned to mostly shut it down and just act anyway. And I would say I have yet to really experience an instance where the fear lived was anything, and the repercussions were anything close to what I had built up in my head.
That is so beautiful. So let's go just a little deeper into that. And what's a tip that you share? And because it's easy to for us to talk about. And like I said, I share mindset tools with my clients and like working on the inner critic, like noticing and naming them. Like fear, I'll just go ahead and share one, and then you could share one. Yeah. Like fear's a story, right? It's like a story that I'm going to let this person down, or I'm going to fail spectacularly. And like the truth is, and I wrote a blog post about this. I went to hear Elizabeth Gilbert speak last year at Kripalu up at a yoga retreat center in the Berkshires. She was like, she was like, no one cares. No one cares. No one really cares what you do. So like, so why not do it? Yeah. But it's a story. Like it's a story. I'm going to let this person down, or this person's going to be disappointed in me. And it's like, well, how much are they really thinking about you? And what's another story you could tell yourself?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great tool. And I think I use something similar in myself, and I don't think I'd even fully articulated it yet, but it's, and I've, worked on this with my therapist, and it's this concept of these gremlins, right? The inner critic, right? And really distinguishing between, this fight or flight response, and whether your fear is rational, unproportional to whatever the perceived threat is, or whether it's some like deeper primal panic response that's happening, and sort of taking a step back and evaluating, am I just adrenaline reacting to this, or am I really right to be this? Right. Because we're no longer in danger of being eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, right? But you do need to watch out for that bus barreling down Fifth Avenue, right? And step out of the way. Have your eyes wide open.
Right. But is that fear serving you when it's about taking a step that even consciously you want to take?
Right.
But it's that physiologic fear, is that holding you back, or can you discern that, is what it sounds like you're saying, and overcome it?
I think that's it. And I think, I've really worked, and so sort of I've always struggled with anxiety, and I have really used a lot of different tools to manage that. And breathing and breath work has been the biggest one. Call it meditation, call it breathing, call it what you want. For me, that really was sort of a game-changing skill of learning how to slow my breath and therefore slow my mind and slow my body. And then for me, because I think a component of who I am as a person has always been somewhat bold. When I've always, I've been fortunate to be able to travel a lot and go abroad. And I always did that. I mean, when I went abroad, like that first trip to Mexico or in college, I was on programs. There's not like huge risk involved in that. But I didn't know anyone, it was all new. But I thought, well, of course I'm going to do that. Like, why wouldn't I do that? It sort of didn't seem like an option to me. I wanted to do it so much more than I was afraid of not knowing anyone.
Right. That's good.
And so I think, one thing I've learned over the past couple of years is that bravery and sort of brazenness is an acquired skill. And I actually, I love the podcast, How I Built This, on NPR, but where different founders talk about how their businesses began. And I was listening to that a lot last spring, and I realized founders of these big companies are like just started out as regular people, and they didn't know anything. And they were were winging it. I would say 98% of the time. And I thought, well, I can wing it. I can do that. And then I would write down, I had this running note on my phone of sort of snippets or quotes that I thought were particularly poignant. And that was a big one that I've come back to a lot. And that was Kathy Hughes, who founded Radio One, which is now called Urban One, which frankly, I was totally unfamiliar with. But the interview was so fascinating. And she said, brazenness and belief in your ability is an acquired skill.
Yeah, I love that.
And I think particularly as a woman in corporate law, you have to really be kind of bold and somewhat aggressive at times in ways that were certainly uncomfortable to me. And I had to really stand behind my work and my research, and that was hard to be challenged on things. But I've learned, and especially in the past year, that these scary decisions, they get easier and easier to make. And it doesn't mean that they're not still scary, but I just I keep leaping because things keep happening and then new opportunities keep arising. And the only way is forward,
I love
the way
that.
forward is forward. So I keep doing that.
That's beautiful. And I'm going to start tuning into that podcast. I love it. 98%. I remember seeing this picture of Jeff Bezos, who, he was like at a desk with like this sign, this like handwritten sign next to him, Amazon.com. And it was like, he started from nothing too.
Yeah.
And he's still, they're still winging it. I mean, they're still writing the playbook as they go. Yeah. So let's just talk for another couple of minutes about networking, and then I want to get to some Q&A with people on the line. Yeah. So talk a little bit about networking. I mean, I think this is a great segue from boldness and brazen. And how do you become a networking whiz?
It's another thing that I kind of have always had in me. And I didn't. It only recently became clear to me that everyone didn't know how to do this. Not to sound like a jerk, but I didn't appreciate that. I don't know. I always was sort of a precocious child who hung out with the adults. So when I started getting to college and looking for jobs, I just started leveraging my parents' friends basically for introductions or connections or first steps. And that has really, and I mean, and then, I do the work, just stand behind it,
Right.
So that helps me get in a door, open a door. But then I had the goods to back it up, but that, never felt sleazy to me. And I hope it doesn't feel sleazy to people in general. Because it was always just an opportunity to learn about something new or gain access to something that I didn't otherwise have access to. And so I think some of it was inherent in me. And then I was laid off in 2008 when the market crashed, and I was unemployed for almost a year. And I mean, I used every connection I had. And I mean, ultimately, I did finally get a job off of someone who I had met briefly at a conference, like, or an event, you know, a year prior. I dug up her contact info from, I don't even know if LinkedIn was really a thing then. It might have existed, but very, very marginally. You know, and I knew I needed every inch I could get in that market. And I was not going, I knew I was qualified for that job, and I knew I could do it. And I was like, I need every leg up I can get. And so I was, you know, I was really aggressive. It was self-preservation.
Well, you've been out of work for a year. So do you have any networking tips to share? Like if it comes naturally to you, you know, if you've broken it down at all, what might be some helpful networking tips to other people?
I think the big thing is to recognize that people like helping other people. And so, when you get to help someone else, you feel good and you feel like you're paying it forward. You're helping someone the way other people have helped you. And so when you are making an ask of someone for help or information, most people want to help you. And that is really freeing. And then from that point, I always just look at it as a great opportunity to meet someone new and learn something new. I like making new connections. I like making new friends. And so there's never any big pressure tied to it. You know, it's a dialogue. And then at the end, depending on how the conversation went, you know, and whether it made sense, you know, my closing thing would be, you know, it was great speaking with you. You know, based on our conversation, is there anyone else you think I should talk to? And just, you know, planting that seed. And they might say no, and they might say yes, you know, or they might say, let me give it some thought, you know, follow up with me. And then it's incumbent on you to follow up. And I think, you know, the name of the game is to just be polite and you know, send thank you notes and all that jazz. And if you can find some point of commonality that you can reference in a subject line of an email, or even better, get an introduction, that's great. But I mean, I've gotten pretty far on cold, carefully crafted emails, or LinkedIn messages. You know, if it's a company you're really passionate about, or a practice that's really exciting to you, that enthusiasm and knowledge is going to come through, you know? So don't like just dash off an email, sort of be thoughtful, compose it, reflect that you know and have followed the person, company, ideally both, you know, and really, you know, just ask for 15 minutes of time and then be mindful of that time, you know, and if they want to give you more, that's great, but don't expect anyone to offer 15 minutes and give you an hour. Yeah. And that's totally the strategy, is ask for 15 minutes and start with that. And then if it's a great conversation, people will go over. Exactly. Those are all great networking tips. I love it. So there was something really in it about not having any big expectations and no attachment, this real openness to the conversation. Right. Okay. So speaking of openness, before we open it up for questions, why don't you just tell us like how people can find out more about you and your workshops and the Integrated Hustle? Yeah, absolutely. So, so our website is integratedhustle.com, and you can sign up for our newsletter, and that's the best way to sort of stay abreast of all of our updates and offerings. We are going to be launching a membership later this month, where you'll have access to live interactive workshops that will be live streamed, so you can gain insight and, you know, practical tips from the comfort of your couch, which is pretty fun, and participate in the conversation. And you can find us on social media. We're at Integrated Hustle on Instagram, on Facebook, and you can reach me by email at ami@integratedhustle.com.
Very cool. Awesome, awesome. All right, so I want to see, there are a couple more people on the line if anybody has any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and I muted the phone. So if you're on the line and you have any questions for me or I, please go ahead. You're unmuted.
No. Very quiet.
Quiet. This is, hello?
Are we still here?
We are still here.
Oh.
Do you have a question?
We can't hear anything.
Yeah, we can hear you. Nope. I don't think there's anyone on the chat. So I'm going to leave you unmuted. If anybody wants to ask any additional questions, please do.
This is Abby. Can you hear me? I actually
yeah, we can.
one
go
question.
ahead, Abby. Yes, go ahead.
Ami, I was struck by what you said about working at your two law firms and about the difference between commercial corporate law and M&A in big law. So coming out of a big law background, I'm wondering how you initially marketed yourself and how you continue to market yourself to as a freelance lawyer, given your big law background.
Yeah, I would say at the beginning, it was sort of treading very lightly and being really transparent with clients about what I had and hadn't done. I will say that because I did M&A, I had done tons of diligence in the course of my career and therefore had read what felt like thousands of commercial contracts as part of that process. So it was not something that was totally foreign to me. I was pretty familiar with what that looked like and the typical components and typical big ticket items. But I would say it's pretty remarkable once you get into a semblance of a specialty, or even, things like, anything service-based. A service agreement is basically a service agreement. It's a service agreement. It's pretty simple as compared to a purchase agreement or a credit agreement. And I use the library a lot. The New York City Bar Association is an amazing resource for freelance attorneys and solo attorneys. And so I availed myself of their library. They have access to Westlaw and Practical Law. I think I got a trial to Practical Law. One of my neighbors is actually a law student, so she was lent me her Westlaw login.
We won't tell. We're
not going to tell. But yeah, I did my homework, and once you start reading these form agreements and you read all the comments, you kind of have a gist of the lay of the land. And then I would, maybe call in a question if there was something really wonky looking, but I really, really tried to do my homework before I reached out to anyone asking for help, so that I wasn't, I was asking really pointed questions.
Does that answer your question, Abby?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
We have one other person in here.
Yeah. The question and answer time is open. So if you are on the line and you have a question for Ami or myself, please go ahead and jump on in and let's chat. Anyone else have a question? The phone lines are open. I feel like a DJ here.
I know.
Old school
I know.
DJ. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And I thought about one thing. I've got lots of things on my website, Women Interested in Leaving Law.com. Lots of great articles and resources there. And I am doing a free webinar also called The Ambivalent Associate. So if you have any friends who are feeling ambivalent about being a big law associate, on June 25th, for the More Than Esquires Network. I'm doing a webinar, free webinar with them. So check that out. But any last thoughts or words of wisdom for women who are thinking about leaving big law, people who are thinking about starting a side hustle? What last words of wisdom do you have?
I think my biggest tip is to be brave and really just trust in your own abilities and resourcefulness. There are few things outside of once you've been through the ringer of some big law transactions or filings or litigations that aren't figure outable, and it's sort of shocking to realize you can function at a slightly more reasonable pace and buy yourself time to figure things out, and so I think, go for it and trust your gut and be brave and try and, whenever you decide to leave, just go out on the best terms that you can, because, you don't want to burn those bridges unnecessarily. And hopefully, you can maintain a positive relationship with the past firms and colleagues. Excellent.
I tell people, if the relationships are meant to last, they will, and if they're collegial, and it is important, I think, to leave a place on a good note, because you never know where those relationships may go down the road. Exactly. So thank you so much for being here and doing this with me tonight. This was so much fun. I learned a lot. I was scribbling furious notes on some of my paper, and one of my favorite things that you said was be bold, be brazen, and have the belief that you can do it.
Yeah.
So on that note, I want to thank you for watching, for tuning in tonight, and hope to see you or meet you another time. Mm-hmm. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
I'm going to stop the recording.
Right.